when I do explain that this happened, I hate to say it, but I'll say, like, you're not, like, I know it sounds like BS, but I actually was held hostage by bank robbers on the FBI's top 10 most wanted list. That sounds like something somebody would make up, but it's, yeah.
Welcome to The Film Swap, the podcast where we challenge each other to watch the movies that we've let slip through the cracks or purposely shoved into the cracks for whatever reasons. I'm Nick Voll.
And I'm Angelica Thornton, and this week we're talking about Bandits.
Good evening, everybody. Tonight we have an incredible story. It's a story of Joe Blake and Terry Collins, the most successful bank robbers in the history of the United States.
I gotta be honest with you, it's not that difficult. You walk in, you ask for the money, you walk out.
You got the gun? No. I think there's a way to do it right. No guards, no tellers, no customers.
We do it with the bank manager in the morning because we kidnapped him the night before.
May I help you?
Oh, I'm sorry. We're here to rob your bank.
The hostages were kept under the strictest possible guard.
Want to see something cool that I can do?
Sure.
Monica. What? We've got guests. Sort of.
You never know what's going to happen during a robbery. There's always a surprise of some kind.
What the hell did you bring her out here for? Well, one, I may have suffered a slight concussion.
Oh my God!
Two, I had no choice.
You pull over and get out of the car.
No.
Well, why not?
I'm feeling very fragile at the moment. I don't think I should be alone.
Three, she's mentally unbalanced to a spectacular degree.
I can hear you. You're not the guys who go to the bank manager's house, you know, the night before.
They do. I drive the getaway car.
You're the Sleepover Bandits.
Bandits is a movie that came out in 2001. It is a crime comedy drama film directed by the great Barry Levinson. It stars Bruce Willis, Bob Thornton, and Cate Blanchett. It was mostly shot in the state of Oregon, in Silverton, along the coast and other areas. If you watch the movie, you'll see a lot of recognizable places if you're from Oregon, of course. It got a couple of Golden Globe nominations. Bob Thornton and Cate Blanchett were both nominated. It did not make money. It cost $75 million to make, and it only brought back $67 million, which surprises me because I thought it was a more successful movie. The plot of the movie is such that two friends and convicts, Joe and Terry, break out of the Oregon State Penitentiary. They go on a bank robbing spree, and they come up with a novel concept. They kidnap the bank manager and his family the night before their intended robbery, hold them hostage overnight, go in the morning with their keys, take the money, and leave before anybody's wiser. In the movie, they somehow hook up with Cate Blanchett's character. She hits one of the characters with a car. Now they're a crime trio and eventually a love trio, which is kind of a strange little part of the movie there. And then at the end of the movie, they rob a bank, but they set it up with a fourth character. This is all very convoluted. I'm not doing a very good job explaining it. He's a stunt man. He's their getaway driver, and he helps come up with a solution for them to get away and all live happily ever after in Mexico. And he marries a young January Jones, which was cool to see. Our guest today has a very special connection to this movie and also a very special connection to Angelica and I. We were all coworkers at one time at KATU. It's Brent Roulier. Brent, thanks for joining us.
Hi, how's it going? Nice meeting you guys. Oh my God. I don't know if you want to redo that, but sorry.
Awesome. I mean, we're practically re-meeting. What has it been, 15 years?
Yeah, it's been a long time. I left in 2007, I guess. Yeah.
So I got there at the beginning of 2007. I was guessing it was less than a year, but just so everyone knows, Brent was a writer at K2. Nick was the producer.
And then Brent was also a producer too on the weekends, right?
Oh yeah, you did
Correct.
which did you do weekend mornings or nights?
Exactly, weekend mornings, yeah.
You're like, I did everything. And I was an anchor. And I just remember your scripts were so funny and so good.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Most major news markets, what they want in news stories is humor.
Totally. That's why
I remember you really used to get into like the entertainment stuff and the quirky stuff, and I was like, "Ooh, these are gems." They were so.
Well, thank you. It was rapping with Raptus that I used to do the whatever her, and one of the biggest Orion. I don't know if you remember Orion Ludlow.
Of course, yeah, he was there forever. Yeah.
He wanted to kill me. I don't know if I should. If you guys are gonna edit this around, right? Like
maybe.
Okay.
Hear the story.
I had a typo. As you know, man, we're just writing. We have so much to do, and it was insane. And I had a typo, so instead of rapping with Raptus, I left out a P Excuse me. I don't mean to laugh because that's not a funny thing, but and that appeared
So
on the air. Yes.
so
Yeah, what you think as that word with Raptus? So that was one of my biggest blunders.
raping with Raptus. Well, Orion
I mean,
beat
that's
you.
not laughing, but yeah. What's that?
Orion has you beat on that because he is responsible for perhaps the best font error in K2 history. People have it framed on their desk, and it was a
Wow.
shooting at Lloyd Center, and it was "Shits Fired," and it was up for a long time.
That's awesome. Oh man, I wish I knew that because he gave me so much grief. But yeah, that's good. Yeah, I had a lot of fun. But yeah, I won't go into the history of everything. But I'm at the same time, I'm glad I'm not in
Oh
that
yeah.
stressful situation anymore. So yeah.
I remember we were doing the morning show once, and you told me a story about the movie Bandits, and it has stuck with me ever since. So when we were talking about what movies to do for Oregon Month, I said we've got to do Bandits and we've got to get Brent on. So you have a very special connection to this movie, and I'll just let you tell your story.
All right, I'll give it a go. Where to even start? Basically, the movie, which I actually just looked up, I made the mistake of saying they used the exact names of in the movie as the robbers. They didn't. They adjusted it slightly. Terry Collins, who's played by Billy Bob Thornton, the actual robber's name is Terry Connor, and Joe Blake, played by Bruce Willis. The actual name, they use both their first names, but it's Joe Dougherty. It looks like Dougherty, but it's pronounced Dougherty. Anyhow, Thanksgiving night, 1983. I was 6 years old. My sister was only 2, and we came home, and the place was ransacked. We came home from Thanksgiving dinner with my grandparents in Mesa, Arizona. We lived in Phoenix, and it looked like somebody had broken in and robbed the place. My mom's jewelry was all over the bed. Things were tipped over. And you got to remember, this has been a long time. This is 40 years later, so. But I have certain memories that have been messing with me for years and years. But of course, everybody's a little freaked out, but we didn't see anybody at first. So my dad told us to wait in the bedroom, my parents' bedroom, while he scoured the house. And we went into the garage, and we heard a loud yell. It was my dad, Joe Dougherty, who in the movie is Bruce Willis's character, Joe Blake, had a gun at my dad's back and told him that they knew my dad was the vice president of First Interstate Bank in Phoenix, Arizona, the downtown location. First Interstate has been gone for several years. It was bought out by Wells Fargo, but back in 1983 is First Interstate. Excuse me, I'm sorry. So they told my dad they've been monitoring us for at least a month, trying to, I don't even know why they told him all this information, but one way or another, they got it across that they'd been monitoring the place, knowing when we left and came home and all that, and took us all into the living room. We all sat on the couch, and he proceeded to explain that they were going to rob my dad's branch. Had guns on us the entire time. And I'm sorry if I'm jumbling all over. You got to remember, I admit, this is a traumatic experience.
Of course.
It messed with me for years and years and years. I mean, I had nightmares I can't even tell you how long, about being held hostage, nobody being able to help me, trying to talk to people please help us, and nobody can help you. Because when you're in that situation, that's what it feels like. You're going through hell and there's nobody else to talk to. And anyhow, so they took it. I'm getting back all over the place. They took us in the living room. My mom was very smart. She was I remember her, she told us about the stuff she was doing later, but she made sure she gave them crystal, for their coffee, they had clear coffee cups so the police should be able to get their fingerprints easier than usual. She hid all kinds of berets and little needles and stuff in her clothing so that if we were tied up and locked locked up. She could help us break out of it, and because she's terrified. She's got a 2 and a 6-year-old kid, and the robbers ended up telling them they were going to use us as collateral, my sister and myself. My big memory for myself personally that I remember, what he actually he was pointing the gun at me and said, "You're not going to do anything stupid, are you, kid?" And of course, no, but that vision of it, it's still like, this is 40 years later, and I still think about it sometimes. Yeah, they took us to the bank, put us in the bathroom. My mom, my sister, myself in the restroom, while they took my dad into the lobby area, and he had to go through everything with them about how how the locks, how the system works, how the vault works, all that jazz, kind of like they showed in the movie with some of the other people. But as the employees started coming in, because by now they had us for several. I mean, they called them the overnight sleepover bandits or whatever, but they had us overnight, and it was early morning hours that they took my dad to the bank. So it was before the bank was even open, and at about the time employees started coming in, they had to be as quiet as possible, but let them know, hey, there's a robbery going on. But they locked the employees in with my sister, my mom, and myself. The whole time, my mom's making us memorize our phone number, our address, all kinds of things, because she was terrified they were gonna take us away, because they told them they were going to use us as collateral. So yeah, during that time, my dad with the gun on his back the whole time, he ends up opening the vault, and I'm sure there was other employees involved, but they get the vault. They stole at least, it was like $270,000. I want to say at the time it was the largest bank robbery in Phoenix at the time. I'm sure it's been surpassed since then. We had to wait. They told us to wait so long, and that they were going to be keeping her. If anybody moved or didn't or left or whatever, of course they'd shoot us. The whole usual hostage threatening situation. They stole my mom's car, and they didn't find. By the way, I actually just rewatched it. If you guys are interested, or anybody's interested, there isn't. It's really hard to find this stuff online now because it's 1983. It was Thanksgiving 1983, but there's a show called FBI Crime Files, and the episode was called Home Invasion, I believe. Home Intruders, sorry. FBI Files Home Invaders. FBI Files Home Invaders is the episode. It covers a lot of this. My family's only a very small portion, because they did this to several people, and I should have looked up. It's hard to, but several people all across the country, not all across the country, but I think it was 5 states that they had charges against them. But one of the things, and I forgot to mention this earlier, and I apologize. I didn't even know this until recently, but Terry had already been arrested. It wasn't when it was my bank robbery. It was just Joe, which was Joe Doherty, which was Bruce Willis's character in the movie, and he had an accomplice who they caught fairly, if I remember correctly, they caught the accomplice not that long afterwards, but I can't find his name. I can't find it. Apparently he was no big deal. But Joe Doherty, because his usual crime buddy Terry wasn't around, he still had to rob banks. And it was like 8 or 9 months after Terry was caught was when he did his first robbery since, which was my family's house in Phoenix, which happens to be the state of one of the main investigators behind these guys. So yeah, I'm sorry. They interviewed my dad afterwards. The cops, the place, of course, cops were all over the place, and there was a lot of interviews, and the FBI came and interviewed my sister. Well, my sister was 2 years old. They mainly interviewed me, but my sister and me, they took me into a room and talked to us and asked us questions. But it was, of course, we're little kids, so it's mainly my mom and my dad. And my mom, she's not around anymore. She died in 2010, but she did an amazing job of doing helping the sketch composite people figure out Joe Doherty, Bruce Willis is in the movie. It looks so much like him. And like in the movie, they were wearing extremely fake wigs, like horribly obvious fake wigs. I want to say he was, like, my memory's messed up. I feel like he was wearing a fake mustache too or something, but I don't know, but memories are weird, and you realize it more and more as you get older.
Hmm.
So everything isn't perfect, but I do. There's little things I remember with my sister because she had no idea what was going on. Thank God, because it didn't mess her up. Luckily, in the same way it did me. Because unfortunately, I remember everything and I understood and knew what was going on, but she was like she even saying we've got robbers at at one
Wow.
point, which was like it made us it's like we're all terrified, but it was like that moment, little moments of with my sister around for humor that kind of, I don't know, I don't want to say helps you get through it, but we kind of needed that, you know. But the whole point is, and I can go on and on and on, and I know I have been, but ultimately, one of my issues with the movie when I watched it, when I was told about it, and I want, though, you guys don't know, I had another news guy I worked with at a small station in Flagstaff, and I want to say he was the one who told me, "Hey, you mentioned something about a story, and I feel like this movie was about your robbers." And I was like, "Really?" Because I don't remember if I hadn't, I think I saw previews for Bandits or something, but I had no idea it was about the same guys. And as you guys can surmise from watching the movie, it really it's like barely anything like what the real people were like or what happened. But that was my issue when I watched it the first time. It really bothered me because um they're using, this is something else I just realized right before we started interviewing. Oh, I already told you that, but they used slightly different names for the characters, but the still they're the Sleepover Bandits. It's inspired by a true story. These are people that, it's not just my family, these are families traumatized in several states across the United States with this kind of thing, that I know I'm not the only one who's dealing with stuff several years later. um to make them these fun loving, lighthearted, this free comedy spirit, especially the weird love triangle thing, like, which had nothing to do, it wasn't
That
based in reality at all. Then I can see, you know, for I actually went to film school for a little bit, and I really wanted to be a filmmaker and screenwriter and all that jazz, and my life took a different turn, but that's something I always kept in my mind, and I have to think Hollywood in general is, you got to keep in mind when you're doing stories, even if it's inspired by, how it can actually impact, you know, real people. So be careful with, don't use the same names. Don't, even if it is slightly inspired, the basic concept, if you're going to go so far over the deep end with a completely different story, I just think it should be made exceptionally clear this has nothing to do with the real real
Mhm.
situation. And anyhow, I'm sorry, I'm going to shut up for now because I've just been
no, we
but
have so
yeah.
many questions. We have so
Okay.
many questions. First,
Go
go ahead, Nick.
I was just gonna say, what you were just talking about is like the portrayal of them as these like lighthearted people, and that's obviously, I mean, they were not these gentlemen bandits as portrayed in the movie.
No, especially Joe Doherty. Unfortunately, I don't know as much about Terry. I have a feeling that all this stuff about him having OCD, and I feel like that was Billy Bob Thornton just playing, because they didn't make any attempt whatsoever to act like the real people, to make him this, you know, because that's part of the character quirk, is you almost feel sorry for Billy Bob,
Mhm.
because you know he's obviously OCD, he's got hypochondria, like obsessive compulsive, all these little things that it makes you more sympathetic for him. But I just know from what I read and what I've watched and seen and stuff in the past, Joe Doherty had more of a reputation, like in the movie, he had more of a reputation for being harder edged, more aggressive, more gun happy, whatever. I'm not trying to say Terry was an innocent sweet pea, but um, once Terry wasn't around, apparently when Doherty did a spree by himself and another accomplice for a little bit, he became much more, from my understanding, he was much more aggressive with showing the guns and more threats and that kind of thing. And yeah, so
Yeah, unfortunately, you ended up with the more impulsive, crazy one, and the
yeah,
one who was a little bit more organized and thoughtful was already caught. So
exactly.
you were on the dangerous end of that. I have so many questions. First of all, let me just say, your mom is incredible, just based on what you just told us. Just the fact that she had the wherewithal through all of this to plan in case you guys were tied up, and the fact that she had you guys memorizing your phone numbers and your address, like she was thinking ahead. I don't know how she did it. That's incredible.
Yeah.
Did you guys have to spend the night with them in your house? Did anyone go to sleep? I'm assuming you didn't go to sleep.
No, I mean, I remember as kids, they told my sister and I lie down. We were in the living. We couldn't stay in our bedrooms because they had to watch us the entire time. I know my parents didn't sleep at all. They tried it, but of course, I don't know if my sister actually slept or not, but the entire time I was wired, obviously, just terrified. So I had my head on the ground there was probably a pillow or something, but yeah, just not. I couldn't sleep, and nobody else did. Again, I don't know about my sister, but yeah.
In that FBI files, when they did that reenactment, it looked like the robbers put at least you in the car with them on the way to the bank. Is that how it happened?
I absolutely remember being in the car with the robbers on the way to the bank. I don't remember. Yes, and my parents. I don't know if I can't remember if they showed that in there or not, but they put us all of us in the car.
Wow.
So yeah.
Did your dad go back to that job?
Yeah, he was a banker for years and years and years. I mean, he was vice president there. I feel like he became president. He had a pretty successful career in banking. And then he did a little time in he right towards the end of his career, he did some real estate and a couple other things. But as a whole, he was a banker for most of his life.
I'm assuming your parents were involved when Joe was caught and there was a trial, and your parents had to be involved in that. That had to be super tough on them.
Yeah, and I would. The thing that stinks is unfortunately, my dad, his memory. He's old now. He's about to turn 80, and his memory. He had some issues with that memory in particular. I can't ask him. I wish I'd asked more questions or whatever, but because they talked about it. My dad in particular talked about it a lot, but not in great detail on certain ththings, particularly relating to the trial. I know my dad was there for part of the trial, and I'm pretty sure my mom was too. But my mom didn't talk about it as much, like this aspect as much. I know for sure the accomplice, whoever that was, my dad was absolutely involved in that part because as a, what do you call it? Oh my gosh, I'm having and had to take the stand. And I remember that the accomplice's girlfriend was saying, on the stand, said that absolutely not, this wasn't him and that kind of thing. And I know Joe wasn't actually caught until, I want to say, it was 1987, and it was another state, and that's covered in that FBI files or whatever. But
he kept going for a long time after he victimized your family.
Well, Terry, sorry, go ahead. I was just going to say that they did get back together because they were both, which I found this so bizarre that they put them in the same car together. But as that episode shows, they took him from prison in the same car together. They hadn't seen each other in a long time, but they managed to break off their cuffs, and the troopers that were taking him to court, they used a razor blade, actually tied him. Anyhow, somehow got their guns from them, tied them up to a tree, and escaped again. They'd already escaped prison together once. And
that seems so Hollywood, but that actually happened. I couldn't believe it when I read that they escaped again. Like, what the hell is going on?
I imagine, as you know, I'm sure the Hollywood, I'm sure the way they actually broke out of the prison wasn't the way it was portrayed in the film, but yeah, that's the thing.
In the film, they just easily took over a cement truck and just blew through.
There's so many,
and then there were all these guards from towers shooting at them, and none of them happened to hit either one of them, which was really not believable.
Everybody was very inept, and that was one of the things that By the way, I want to make it clear, I'm not gonna, especially if Carl, because I remember, I think Nick said Carl said this is his favorite film from Oregon or, or
I think
something.
that's what he said. He likes it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. The second time, I'm almost embarrassed to admit this. It took me like 4 days to get through the. it's
Mhm.
it's only an hour and a half movie or something, but
No, it's 2 hours and it's about a half an hour too long.
Brent, this is obviously a life-altering event, and that's an understatement. How long was it before you could even talk about this happening? I mean, you were only 6 years old, and I'm guessing your family didn't talk about it a lot?
well, I don't know how to explain it. It excuse me. I admit I did. I kind of kept it a secret for a long time, and I wouldn't talk about it. And even though our house was on the news, which was weird. I look at some of this stuff, and between my dad's name being used, we actually got some weird calls from people um afterwards. But again, you have to be kind of smart. I think they're smarter now in certain respects on how they cover things, but back then in particular, it was just a come on, like you're showing where we live, telling our name, it's giving weirdos opportunities to harass us. And there wasn't a ton of that, but we did get some. But yeah, I didn't talk about it until in high school. I don't. It was an English class, and we had to tell a story about our lives, and I don't remember what the exact theme was, but for whatever reason, I chose that, and I wrote a thing about it, and the class was blown away. Like they just couldn't believe like that was me and my story and my life and my family, and that I'd never talked about it before. And part of it is because I just didn't want to draw a lot of attention to it, and it is traumatizing. And um, but at a certain point, like I do mention it now and then. Like I've had to explain things. Like I used to have a roommate that drove me crazy about not locking the door, and I finally he thought I was like this anal OCD freak, and I'm like, I just said to him one day, look, man, the truth is I was held hostage with my family when I was 6. I still do. I have a weird thing about doors. I mean, to me, it's not really weird. It's just common sense.
Mhm.
But I'm extra. I realized later there were things that affected me that I didn't. It took a long time to realize that some of this, and it's not just the robbery, and I'm not going to go into my whole life story, but I had enough other weird things in my life that I do have PTSD, and I didn't realize I'm super to this day so jumpy. Like if anybody walks behind me, or I'm like I had a guy at work that used to mess with me all the time about he thought it was hilarious because I would be jumpy, and I didn't know until honestly it was only like maybe a year ago that I found out that's actually a common PTSD thing about being super hypersensitive to your area and people around you. And um yeah, so anyhow, I don't really know how to answer your question other than I'm much more comfortable talking about it now. I mean, obviously I'm on your podcast, but I still don't. I still surprise people sometimes when somehow it comes up one way or the other. Yeah, but it's not something I talk about all the time. But I'm much more comfortable now, and part of it is just like we all, as you get older, we've all seen the shit, if you will. Like
Mhm.
Yeah.
we've all had experiences one way or another, and you start realizing it's not something you have to be ashamed of, or like um not it's nothing you did to make this happen. It's just, yeah. And so that's why I think as a kid I felt more guilt and weird. I don't know, like, and I don't even know why, but um you just as a kid, your perception of why things happen, you kind of blame it on yourself more. And as you get older, yeah, I just realized that's not, obviously it's not the case. So yeah.
Is
Did you go
Thanksgiving
to
difficult? Go ahead, Nick.
I was gonna say, did you go
I'm
to
not
therapy as a
sorry.
kid?
I didn't, and I'll be honest with you. I wish I would have. I should have. But I also know this was the '80s. That was 1983. Therapy, all that. I mean, obviously it was happening, but I think parents now are much more. How do I? And I can. This isn't speaking for everybody and all parents, but even mental health in general, it's not. It's still obviously stigmatized, and I'm part of what I'm writing about is related to that. But yeah, I don't think it was as thought of at the time that when you go through this, the family should go. I don't mean to laugh, but just, yeah, you should go to therapy, but I didn't, and I wish I did. So yeah.
That's how we coped with things back in the 80s. My mom's best friend when I was 6 was murdered by her husband.
Oh wow.
And we were at the beach the day before it happened together. And the next day was Monday, and my mom got to work and said, "Where's Marlene?" And they said, "Sit down." And they told her she'd gone to a bowling alley the night before with her son, who was early teens, and her husband, who she just asked for a divorce. She just asked him for a divorce, came and shot her in front of their son several times. And I remember going to the funeral, but I was 6, so it was just weird flashes of memories. And I remember my mom testifying at the trial because my mom was with her the day before and talking about, everything that was going on. And I also remember people saying, "Don't talk about it." Yeah. Family and friends just saying, "Don't talk about it in front of the kids. Don't talk about it with each other." And it was like this weird, if we don't talk about it, it didn't happen, and let's forget about it. Obviously, you're never going to forget about it, but I think it was, 1981 when this happened.
Sure.
This is how we coped. So I'm not surprised that you kind of buried that for a long time. And then it's going to come up naturally when you're a teenager and you're thinking about, is Thanksgiving difficult for you still?
For years for years it was. Every time we came home, because it was like the tradition was to visit my grandparents in Mesa, which I know a lot of people, you guys aren't probably familiar, but Mesa is a suburb. It takes a good 45 minutes from where we live to get out to see them. So the drive, yeah, we would think about it. And I remember one Thanksgiving when my dad's memory was still intact, maybe honestly wasn't that long ago. Like I mean, it was before my mom died, but he said, "This is the first Thanksgiving I've had." It wasn't until towards the very end of the night that he realized he hadn't thought about the robbery like all day or whatever. But he has PTSD. I mean, and that's the thing, is it affected us all differently. My parents, I mean, my God, between obviously just worried about losing each other, but also they have kids, and being defenseless, and like when you're watching, you can't do anything, you can't protect. There are things that happen that, as a parent, I'm not a parent myself, but I can imagine how hard that would be, knowing like, oh my God, my kids are going through this, I can't do anything about it right now. How are you going to deal with this? And that, that haunted both my parents for years and years. And as a kid, my part was like, you at that point, you always think your parents like can always protect you. They're always, if anything happens, your mom and dad are there one way or the other. And I think that's why I had those nightmares for so long, when I would try to reach out, try to call people, try to get help, and nobody would help me. But yeah, that's because it affects you depending on your age and the situation. It totally affects people differently. And I'm sorry, I got way off from what you're asking.
Are you kidding? Yeah. No, this is, and obviously, if you don't want to answer certain questions, don't.
Oh no, I'm fine.
We don't want to trigger you or anything.
But yeah, it doesn't. I admit, I still think about it. I mean, I think about it a lot, regardless. But I still think about it usually on Thanksgiving. But it doesn't. It's just like, I hate to use the cliche, but when they say time heals all wounds, it's just it's just not as big of a deal now. But there were years where it kind of was, and it was haunting, I guess is the best word to use for it. But yeah, but anyhow, yeah.
Oof.
Well, do you guys want to talk about the movie?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. Let's talk about the movie. Nick, what did you think?
It wasn't quite what I expected it to be. I also didn't like it very much. I just thought it was tonally bizarre. Like, it was, these very serious things like Brent's talking about, married with like this weird polyamorous relationship, and like these light jokes, and like we're supposed to like Billy Bob and Cate and Bruce, and it's like they're clearly disturbed people, all of them. I thought that the best part of the whole movie was the wigs. Like every time they had a different stupid outfit on, I did laugh, and it's weird to find the humor in that detail. But I don't know. I didn't love the movie. I stayed up way too late last night watching it, and I kind of wouldn't have if I didn't have a reason to.
I agree. I'm surprised by how much I did not like this movie, considering the cast. It's got a great cast.
And Barry Levinson's a great accomplished director.
Yeah.
So this came out a month after 9/11. You were talking earlier about like why it lost money and why maybe we don't remember. I don't think a lot of people wanted to go to the movies in October of 2001. So that might have had something to do with it. But I just think it was a bad movie. I think whatever it got on Rotten Tomatoes, 64% is generous. And I think it was even worse because you had these good actors in it who, have given us transformative performances in other films. And I just really didn't connect with any of them. I didn't find them likable. I think you're supposed to find them likable, even though they're not great people. Obviously, they're criminals. And I found the least likable character to be Cate Blanchett. I just wanted to strangle her. I mean, she just like, what are you bitching about? Like, what really? I just, from her horrific taste in music to, her. Oh, come on. That line where she said to him, I can't believe you know that song. That song number one for so long.
Yeah.
Like, how did this pass through so many people in editing?
So it's writing though, right? That's problem.
Bad writing. You're right. I just found her character pretty irritating, and I did not believe that either one of them, well, maybe Billy Bob's character, Terry, would fall in love with her because they make it very clear that he hasn't had relationships and he's pretty desperate for love. But it was slow. It was too long.
It helps that she looks like Cate Blanchett.
Yeah, that's true. I'm thinking a woman. Yeah.
She's a very good looking woman. I think she plays it really well as far as what she's given, but she's given such a one note seeming character. The scene, and my wife and Marissa started this movie with me and said, that's all right, I'm done. I'm going to bed. But the scene where she is dancing by herself in her kitchen while she's cooking.
That's when I wanted to turn it off and leave. I was like, this is stupid. And
what human being does this?
No one, especially that song. Just awful. And I just thought the pacing and the tone was off the whole time. It was at least 30 minutes too long.
Mm-hmm. And then like the stuntman character and the way he played into the resolution was ridiculous and stupid. And I don't understand what Troy Garrity, what kind of accent was he going for in this movie? Like, it didn't sound like any American dialect, and he's American. So he was supposed to be like dumb. And I think he played it by, he conveyed that he wasn't very smart by talking like a person who doesn't exist. You know what I mean? Like, just so many weird choices and weird writing choices. I just didn't get it.
The one time I laughed, Brent, you kind of touched on this a little bit. They gave Terry's character OCD and hypochondria because I think they wanted us to feel empathy for him, whatever, connect with him somehow. The only time I laughed was when the cop pulled up to the drive-thru at the bank and he said, whoever's supposed to be the teller had vaginitis. And then I realized, why am I laughing at this? I'm so juvenile, but that's who I am. That's the only point in the whole film that I laughed. I didn't really think the rest of it was funny. I don't know. I thought Bruce Willis's character, I'm not a huge Bruce Willis fan as far as his acting. I think he's a likable actor. I don't think he's a good actor. I just thought he was just there and didn't really add much. And now that I know about the real person that he's based on, I hate the movie even more.
Okay. If you got, everything you're saying, both of you, is absolutely, like, I could just been talking the entire time. I completely agree. The vaginitis, I admit, that also was the only part I laughed. And the music, oh my gosh, I can't remember a soundtrack that I liked less as a whole in a while. And that line in particular, as you said, I even wrote it down. That bothered me. It was such a popular song. That was just odd. And it all comes down to odd choices, just all the way around.
Odd choices. That's the perfect way to put it. When was the first time you saw this?
I saw it on DVD back when DVDs, like, like I said, it was somebody I worked at the time when it came out. I was working at a very small news station in college town, Flagstaff, Arizona, while I was going to school there. And yeah, the person said, and I'm pretty sure this is how it happened, but they said, "Hey, I watched this comedy, and yeah, it sounds like," because I told him, or I mentioned, somehow it came up, and I mentioned the robbers and whatever, and how they went across the country holding up, managers or whatever of banks hostage, and sometimes that was the other thing, by the way. I kept saying families. Not everybody was a family. Obviously, I don't know how many families there were, but many cases it was just the manager himself or him and his girlfriend or wife or whatever. So they had different experiences too, but it affected a lot of people. Um, and that's why I always thought there should be a documentary or something, not silly, not something on TV that's like the FBI. I mean, it was interesting to me because of going through it, but they were interesting enough, and there were enough odd situations. Like honestly, I could see somebody making a much better film, whether it be a documentary or a film. But yeah, go ahead and use them, but tell the real story, because it is a fascinating story. But
And you said,
sorry,
no, that's okay. You said this time it took you a couple days to watch it. Is that just because the film pisses you off, because it's bad, or because obviously you were impacted by these crimes?
It was a little bit of all. This time, because I was more prepared for it. The first time I watched it, because I was thinking, I didn't know much about the film at all. So I was more shocked by, are you kidding me? Like I kept thinking, like, is this really happening? They even showed a lady that's like, "Oh, the Sleepover Bandits, like, yay, like, hold us hostage. We're gonna be on the news." She didn't say we're gonna be on the news. I'm exaggerating a little bit, not much though.
Yeah, come on in, she said.
Yeah, come on in. Like, that was so weird that, yeah, nobody going through this whole process was thinking, should we do that? And yeah, and if they did, they were like, yes, we should, like every time, to the worst idea. But yeah, this time it was more, I just had a hard time focusing. I didn't care anymore. As you mentioned, I didn't like the characters. Not one of them did I really care about what happened to them, which you always need somebody. You don't have to necessarily root for them, but care about what happens to them one way or the other. And Billy Bob's character just annoyed me. And I really, as an actor, and he did a fine job acting. All the acting as a whole, that was the thing, is when Nick said, and Angelica, you said as well, as pointing out the writing, they're good actors. It was just a bad script. And Barry Levinson, again, he's a good director. He did stuff I really like, but it was a bad script, and that's ultimately what it comes down to. Bad script.
Yeah, it seemed like it was just trying really hard to be quirky.
Yeah.
What if we made it so they all get in a relationship together? What if we make it so the whole OCD thing was a gimmick? It wasn't. It was like an attempt to buy characterization. It was an attempt to buy depth for that character without actually doing any work. You know what I mean? He just talks about his health things, and it's supposed to be funny. And I don't know. The scene where the first time they kidnap a bank manager's family and they're all sitting around eating spaghetti together, I just hated that scene so much. And it was like played to be cute. Like the kids were making jokes, and those were Bruce Willis's real life daughters.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. It's like Scout and one of the other ones.
Yeah, these are nice guys, and he has something in common with the mom. They're really into cooking.
Talk about cooking and like,
yeah. That scene in particular, the first time I saw it, oh man, did that bother me? Because I mean, it wasn't supposed to be my family in the movie, but just a family in general, and knowing what happens and what you go through and all that, I was just, oh yeah. So yeah, I didn't.
Yeah, and I know one of the families that one of the families they kidnapped was Vancouver, Washington, right? And that played a huge role in them getting on the FBI's most wanted list. And it was both of them. It was Terry and Joe. And I read a little bit about that. But as I'm talking to you, I'm thinking, man, I wonder if they went into, Joe's whole crime spree, and they kind of took snippets from every single victim and their families and sort of combined them into these fictitious versions. And I'm thinking about your little sister saying, we have robbers, we have robbers.
Yeah.
It's like the kid at the table with the spaghetti. I mean, a child that young is not going to know, and they're going to cope with, okay, I'm going into my own pretend world here. But it's kind of sickening when you think about that these were real people and these were real families.
Yeah. No, and I struggle all the time with. I just watched. I don't know if you guys have seen The Offer, about the making of. I really enjoyed it, and yet I know a lot of it was complete BS. So it's like I have to find this balance at times when I'm watching movies based on true things about why is it sometimes I let things slide and other times not. And ultimately what it comes down to is how serious the situation is. And if you're telling a story about, crimes that actually affected and hurt people, doesn't always have to be physical. It can be psychological. And that was what most, they never punched my dad or shot us or anything like that. It wasn't physical, but it was mentally very scarring and traumatizing. And that's when I'm watching movies and TV shows, and I always have to let some of it slide no matter what I watch, because as you know, there's no way you can just tell the exact story exactly how it happened. And if you did, the movie would be 50 hours long and boring as hell. But I think about it, just ultimately that's what it comes down to, is I hope writers as a whole need to think about, when it's based on a real person, how is this, you can't do it to death because you'll never get anything on the page, but it's something people should consider.
As a viewer, I think ignorance is bliss. I cannot stand, I would say at least 90% of films about journalism, and I won't watch them because we just know too much. I mean, Spotlight was good because Spotlight was very true to the real story. But most other movies, if you're intimately aware of what led up to these crimes, I mean, you're not going to be able to ever watch it. But then that gets me thinking about all these other movies where we love the bad guy, and I'm like, oh man, Henry Hill had victims, and so did everyone in Goodfella, and you're just like, oh man, it's tough.
I feel that way about pornography when I watch it. I'm like, that's not how it really happens.
Goodfellas, that's an excellent example, and it makes me, I sound like a hypocrite, because I admit I love Goodfellas. That's a fantastic movie, but you're absolutely right. He was a sociopath, and the people that were murdered and killed and the families. And so, I don't know how to say it. I don't know there shouldn't be rules necessarily on art as a whole, but it's something to think about. And
I think you're allowed to say whatever you want about Bandits, A, because it sucks, and B, because that was your family and it was this just pinnacle moment in your life. 6 is old enough to remember. 6 is old enough for it to transform you. And of course, your parents, it probably changed your parents.
Oh, absolutely.
You are writing about it now?
It's a part of, I don't even know how to explain what it is, but it's just part of, I've had a lot of crazy things in my life that sound like BS, but they're absolutely true. And that's why, because that's one of the things I always preface when I do explain that this happened. I hate to say it, but I'll say, you're not, I know it sounds like BS, but I actually was held hostage by bank robbers on the FBI's top 10 most wanted list. That sounds like something somebody would make up, but it's, So I'm just taking a whole bunch of snippets of the stuff that sounds made up but did happen, and I'm trying to organize it and fit it together. And
it should be called "You're Not Going to Believe This Shit," but ...
I'm actually calling it, at least for the time being, but it's called Angels and A-Holes.
Oh, I love it. That's good.
So that's what I'm going with for now.
That's actually what we were going to call our podcast, but Angelica didn't like it. I kept calling her an a-hole.
Nice.
Oh man.
Do we have anything else to say about this movie? I kind of like what Roger Ebert wrote about it. He said it's rare for a movie to have 3 such likable characters and be so unlikable itself. And I don't agree that they're likable, but I get what he's saying. Those 3 actors are so watchable, and I just kept wondering what they were doing in this movie. And did they feel like when they were shooting, like, yes, this is working, guys, we've got something here? Like, they couldn't have felt that way, right? I don't know.
I don't know.
I especially feel that way about Billy Bob Thornton, from the first scenes when they were in the prison yard and he was sort of overacting that character. And then he's in the cement truck and they're leaving, and that really just bad back and forth with him and Bruce Willis. I thought he was so much better than this, and even in 2001. I mean, he had already been he was already a star, right? He was already up there, top actors ever. And I just thought, how could they have been happy with this? Cate Blanchett too. I mean, she was younger, but she was still doing great stuff then. And
she'd already done Elizabeth.
They should have known that the writing was trash, and it just didn't work. It just didn't work for me.
And then the framing of the movie with the interviews and the crime show, I guess you kind of needed it if you wanted to have like a wider perspective. But at the same time, the whole thing felt weird and very forced. And like, I think the movie would have been a lot more effective if they had just kept it within the trio.
Yeah, and the ridiculous ending with the fake gunshots and the fact that they put them in the body bag and just hand them off to whoever.
My gosh.
Ambulance. I was like, what the hell is this? That's when they sort of gave up on, trying to, I don't know. They just gave up.
It's like a fake Hollywood ending to a crappy Hollywood movie.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, I couldn't get over the body bag part about nobody's like that they wouldn't be tested by numerous.
There's no medical examiner, their bodies would be there for at least a day while they're collecting evidence.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And what about the blood that came out of the squibs? They're going to test the blood and be like, this is corn syrup. Like, they didn't. Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah. It sucked. Bad. I would not recommend.
And then I like
that's the one thing. Sorry, go ahead.
No.
Oh, you mentioned I hate to say this, but the one thing I feel, I don't want to say vindicated, but I am happy that it bombed and that it's not considered a classic or that everybody loves it and whatever, because then it would bother me a lot more, because I'd constantly feel the need to, like, you guys, this didn't happen. This isn't the way it happened. And it's just in general, I know I've talked about this too much, but I think a lot of people, their memories of history, things that have actually happened, when things are altered so much, we're idiots now. We don't read, we don't pay attention. Like their Hollywood perceived interpretation of what happened is what a lot of people go away with, thinking maybe not exactly that's what happened, but that, they wouldn't have lied that much. Well, this movie, if it had been really successful and everybody loved it, maybe the Bandits would have had more of a cult following or whatever, but because it bombed and it didn't. And I feel better that it didn't do well.
As it is, I think we're supposed to be left with this feeling like Joe and Terry are Robin Hoods, like he says in the movie.
Totally.
Even in the reality of the movie, how are they Robin Hoods? Because were they giving money away to people? No.
Yeah. No, he was spending it on ridiculous stuff, as Terry kept pointing out. But that one line where he says we're stealing from the banks and,
they steal from us.
Yeah, they steal from us, and we're just taking it back and giving it to the people. What people? It's so dumb.
You reminded me of one other part that made me laugh, and that was when that totally made up character, the special effects guy, was dressed in that ridiculous like alligator skin outfit or whatever. I mean, just outrageous. And Terry said to him something like, are you keeping a low profile? And he's like, yep. And they're both like, okay. And just looking at it, they didn't have to say anything else. But when he was sitting in that chair with that outrageous outfit, I admit it made me laugh. But
yeah. And that was Billy Bob Thornton's strength right there as an actor, because he's so deadpan when he delivers lines like that. It's perfect.
Yeah.
And Brent, you mentioned Hollywood writing history and popular perception. It reminds me of my old landlord. So years ago, she had us over for dinner and she's like, oh, I just watched this movie. It's a great history movie. I know you like history, which I don't know why she said that because I never mentioned it, but she's like, so you need to watch this. This is really good. And she brought out a DVD, and I swear to God, it was Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. And she was serious.
No.
She was. She's like, well, I know there weren't vampires, but there's a lot of really good history in here.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
That's America.
There you have
it. That's insane. Yeah.
Well, hey, thanks for talking to us about this. I know it can't be easier maybe than it was years ago, but it's still a tough thing to talk about. We appreciate you putting it into perspective. And if anyone listening has seen the movie or plans on seeing the movie, I think it's good to have this information.
No, and thank you both so much, because I admit that I recorded something for ages ago. I was going to do a podcast about this, and I don't know if you guys realize this, but podcasts aren't easy to do.
You should still do it, because you probably still have a lot more to say about it.
Oh, thanks. But yeah, the project fell apart, but I've always wanted to talk about this. So I really thank you guys so much for giving me the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for coming on.
All right, Nick, next week we are watching The Outsiders, which Nick has never seen.
I've never seen it. It's a 80s classic. I know there's like a million young actors who went on to do things, and so
the Brat Pack, right?
Yeah, and you were saying this is now like in 7th grade curriculum, so obviously there's something here, and it's Coppola, so you can't go too wrong, right?
Yeah, it's a good film. I'm curious. I'll be curious about your reaction to it. There's things that are really great about it, and then but it'll be good.
I know the phrase "stay gold pony boy" shows up at some time, and I can't wait to understand the context of that comment, because I've heard it places and I'm like, I don't know what that means.
And we'll talk about why my obsession with Ralph Macchio suddenly ended one day with me ripping his poster off my wall.
Film Swap is produced and hosted by Angelica Thornton and Nick Voll. You can watch or listen on YouTube, Spotify, Anchor, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. Follow Angelica on Twitter at Angelica KATU, and follow Nick at Nick Voll. Share your thoughts on the films we discussed there, and we might just read them on the show. Music by John Michael Farley and Nick Voll.